Hey, how are you doing? And welcome to, I think this is probably the first Facebook Live that I'm actually doing off of my personal page. This is the DJ Sabanjo page. If this is your first time here, well, go ahead and like the page. I want to say thank you very, very much for showing up. Now, what I'm doing today is I'm sharing something which personally is a very, very big deal. If you know me and if you followed me for a while, you've probably heard me say I don't like selling. Well, actually, let's put it this way. I got very good at it, but I never really liked it. So what I want to do is I've had people say, people who are close to me say, DJ, why would you say you don't like selling? I mean, if anybody doesn't like selling, you're going to be broke. If you have a problem with selling, then you're going to really struggle. And I understand that because I used to say the very first thing. So I felt, let me just really help you understand why I don't like selling, why I can't stand selling, and what I've been able to learn in the first place. And we probably need to go a little further back to when I was a little younger, right? This was in the early 2000s, about 2002. And I remember this particular time, my wife and I, we were living in a shared house in Plumstead in London. And at the time, she was heavily pregnant and we're looking to have our first child at the time. And, we were at a point where I was working as a station assistant with London Underground, but I had dreams. I just felt, yes, I could go very far in my career and I could really do something. And so could my wife. About this time, though, a couple of things happened. My mentor, his name is Sam Adeyemi, he came into London and he sat down with my wife and I. While we were chatting, he then said something. He asked me a question. He says, well, what is it you're doing about your financial future? And I said, well, I've just started this job, only came into the country a little over a year ago. So I'm looking to move up into management and then see where things take me from there. He said, well, that's great. But what is it that you're doing that God can multiply? And I felt, well, I don't know. I mean, I'm looking to move up and hopefully, my income can grow up that way. And that's when he said something to me. He said, you've got to look for something you can do by the side that God can multiply. I thought, whoa, I hadn't thought about that. And this was when I then opened myself up to actually getting started in business. And I started to look. I looked at real estate. I looked at the time at starting a business from scratch. I looked at starting a franchise business. And I just realized I didn't have the credibility or the money to be able to start one of those at the time. So what I then considered was an industry that you may or may not know about called the direct sales network marketing industry. Okay, so I came across this industry and I was fascinated because it was built on the premise that for you to succeed, you need to help other people succeed, which really aligned with me and my background. So at the beginning, I mean, really, when I got started, I still remember we were staying in this house that we were sharing with a couple of old school mates of mine. But it was, at the time, I was looking at achieving financial freedom. If I could do something meaningful with my life. I was young. I was in my mid-20s, and I felt I just wanted to do something meaningful. I didn't want to live an average, ordinary life. And this looked like an opportunity for me to do this. But, it was a little deeper than that for me. I'd grown up with a father who had become a top executive with a major multinational corporation. And at the time, we lived a good life. We had the chauffeur-driven cars and all of that. It was a decent life that we were living. But I still remember this particular day when I was in university at the time, and my father comes with his driver. And something was just a little different. My father brought more stuff for me than usual. He gave me more money than usual. And I'm thinking, what's going on, Dad? And I was excited that I was getting a little more than usual. But at the same time, this was my first year in university. I just felt something was not right. And then when my father was leaving, as he was about to get into the car, he turns back and he says to me, son, I'm no longer working at the company he was working with. I'm not going to say the name, right? And he said, don't worry, it's going to be fine. And I don't know why, but as he left, I remember just seeing, as the car was driving off seeing the back of the car, and something inside of me just began to worry. I really began to think, what's going on here? Yeah, true to form, things went downhill from there for my dad. I mean, I remembered my father just aged very quickly. My father was never an entrepreneur. My father had never done business. He'd been in corporate all his life. He was a very brilliant and intelligent man who'd served his organization very well, risen up the ranks to pretty much the top in the organization. And at some point, they probably felt, you know what? We can bring in someone who's younger, who we could pay a lot less money, and who also could probably, be more aligned with where we are going as an organization. So they let him go. And it just didn't work well. And I saw my father age very quickly. I saw the quality of our lives deteriorate because we became a one-income family from a two-income family because my father lost his job and he literally just wasn't able to find his feet. And that stayed with me for a long time. And I promised myself, I remembered, in the car driving past where he used to work, where he used to be an executive member. And I said to myself, I was not going to pour myself into someone else's dreams and build their company. So when I started doing this business, it was, this for me was really critical, that I was not going to find myself in this situation. Now, I got started, and in my head, I just thought, my passion and my ability to present was going to make things work for me in this business. And if you know anything about direct sales network marketing, the whole idea is you do presentations, you show people how things work, and if it's a product-based company or a service-based company, and the whole idea is you're recruiting other people who are going to be selling the products and services, who also recruit others who are selling the products and services. So you're basically selling a business opportunity, you're also selling a product or a service. And I just felt with my passion and my ability to present, this would work for me. And I remembered sitting there, and in my head, I was going to be a millionaire in 6 months. I really thought so, genuinely, right? Okay, I was naive, but that was what I thought at the time. So I got started, and went out there, and I would speak to people. I would sit down, show them this, how things worked, and I was with all the passion and all the energy. And I remembered my cousin. I sat down with her. I knew she was going to say yes to this because I kind of had a sense of where she was, and I knew she was looking for something. So I sat down, I was excited during the circles, showing her how it worked, sharing other people's stories, and I was just going and I was going and going. And then when I was done, she looked at me and she says, wow. She says, you're really passionate about this. I believe you're going to be very successful. And I was like, well, thank you, but my objective was not for you to validate me. My objective was for you to buy, but that really was the pattern. I got lots and lots and lots of no's. And I think after about 3 months in, I realized, what, this is not right. I just thought my passion and my ability to present was going to be attractive, but it wasn't working. This was when I realized I didn't know how to sell. So I felt, okay, I have got to learn how to sell if I'm ever going to be able to make this thing work, right? And so I began to get books, books from people like Zig Ziglar, Brian Tracy, Jeff Gitomer, and I began to really pour myself into these books. I began to study selling. I began to really get into it. And then as I began to learn, I just began to implement. That's because that's the sort of person I was. I was really learning selling, really getting to understand the psychology of selling and all that. And I would sit down and I began to realize that I began to apply what I was learning. My numbers began to go up. I began to get better results. So I had gone from, speaking to 20 people, and I'd be lucky if I got one person to buy my opportunity or product, to a point where I would speak to 10 people and I get maybe 2 of them buy, and the philosophy then was, some will, some won't. So what next? And the whole idea is don't waste your time. You've got to go through all the no's to get the yeses. That was what we were taught. And that was what a lot of the sales training was basically given to us, was most people are going to say no, but you've got to go through the no's to get the yeses. And so I kind of ran with that. And, as I making that next phone call, I'd psych myself up, before I get into the call, and I'd have that call. Most of the time it was going to be a no. And then I put it down and I have to psych myself up literally to keep on keeping on. Now, the good thing is I had a good attitude. I had a few other qualities I developed that helped me through that painful process, because it was a painful process, but I was just keeping myself going because I had a dream and I had a goal. So I was enduring this thing I hated. I hated the rejection. I hated the pushback. I hated having to come up against all of that. But I just focused on my goal so I could endure this unpleasant experience. And that was how it was going on for me for a while, until something happened that really changed things. And I still remember this. There was a gentleman who was in my team and who had given me the names of a few people who he wanted me to call on his behalf, right, to close the sale. So I called this particular lady, very pleasant lady. And then we had this conversation. He'd said to me she was very keen. So as we started talking, she would throw up objections and I'd push back, the things I'd learned to do in selling, how to handle the objections, how to reposition things and all that other fancy stuff that you learn to do in sales training. So I was doing this with her and I was just doing this. It was what I was meant to do. It was what you do. But eventually, we kind of got to a point and then she said she was going to get back. So I didn't hear from her. So I got in touch with the gentleman and he said something to me. He said that she said she wasn't interested any longer because I was quite pushy on the phone. Now, I'd never seen myself as a pushy person, right? But I was just selling, and I remembered as soon as he said that to me, something in my tummy, it was like I felt terrible. I didn't want to be that person. First of all, I didn't enjoy it. But now for the first time I had feedback. Not only did I not enjoy it, but the person on the other side wasn't enjoying it as well. At this point, for a while, I just sat back and I felt I couldn't do this anymore. I just felt I couldn't do this anymore. And then, it's really interesting how, I believe I'm Christian and I believe at this point, God must have been, just, hi, Katrina, how are you doing? Right. And then I came across this book that changed things for me, right? This book it was a small blue book. It's called Questions Are the Answers by Alan Peace. I went into the bookshop one day. I went to the business section. At the time, you didn't see network marketing books in the business section, but I saw this book and it was called Questions Are the Answers by Alan Peace. Okay, so I pick up the book and how to get to yes in network marketing, and that was what got my attention. Network marketing, so grabbed the book and I took it along with me and I read that book. And that book literally, it was, first of all, he said, just follow this process and you'll get results. And I thought, why not? So, and basically the whole idea was you just ask people a sequence of questions, about 6 or 7 questions. I can't remember right now. Right. And I felt, wow, okay, this is good. I'm going to practice this. And so we had a couple of friends who were coming to see us in our home. This was a friend who I actually had tried to present the opportunity to. I tried to sell it to her before and she hadn't bought into it, but they were coming to see us again. So what I did this time, right, was I just sat down, we're in the living room, and I started to ask her these questions, one after another. It was just some really interesting questions. I asked the first question. By the time I got to question 4, she was literally in tears as she was answering my question. I began to feel quite uncomfortable. It really felt like I was manipulating her, right? It was a completely different experience. And we just worked through those questions. And by the time we were through, she was very open. And as I just went through the same presentation I went through, she was excited and she joined straight away. So she bought into it. And I thought, whoa, this definitely worked. So I tried it again with a couple other people and I got the same results. This was when I felt, wow, I think I have landed a winner here. So what did I do? I reached out to my small team. At the time, I had a small team of about 20 people. Only about 15 of them were still active. The other 5 had dropped out. So I reached out to this small team and I taught them this new approach. And I said, this is what we're doing right now. These are the questions that you've got to ask people. So just go out there and start asking these questions and you will see your results would improve. And my assumption, and I really did think that my organization was going to explode as people were going to be getting phenomenal results. But of the 15, only about 2 of them, after were really beginning to get results which were similar to mine. And that's when I realized maybe there was a little more to this than just asking these questions. So what did I do at this point? What I then decided to do was I began to listen in. I began to really follow them more closely, to listen into their conversations, to see how they handle these conversations, to see what they did. And then what I realized, the difference between the 2 who were getting similar results to mine and the other 13 who were really, really struggling was they were not focused on closing the sale. They were not focused on nailing another person, bringing another person in, getting that person's credit card. And you know, for me, it was a massive learning experience, just sitting there and realizing for the people who were getting similar results to me, their focus was not really in what you will call the end, but it's because we think it's the end, right? Their focus was not, I need to land a buyer, I need to get a sale, I need to get this client. You know, my goal is to land this client, right? I realized that they trusted the process so much that their focus really was on helping people through the process rather than closing the sale, right? And you know what? It was like, that was for me was a big light bulb moment. That, hold on, the focus is not on the sale, but the focus is on helping people through the process. Now, I didn't really understand what the process was then, but I knew that I had landed something. So I began to explore, so what is this process? And as I began to really study and pay attention and think things through, just looking at the patterns and looking at, you know, how things had worked for me over the years, and then with the people in my team who were getting results, that's when I realized what it is. It's belief. Right? It's belief. And it's the fact that we're trying to sell to people. I don't know if you've heard this phrase before, that people don't like to be sold, they like to buy. Now, I'm sure you've heard it before, but yet we still tell people you've got to learn how to sell if you want to get great results. Even though people don't like to be sold, they like to buy. So this is when I began to think, you know what? Why don't we just stop trying to sell people and instead help them to become buyers? Right. And, you know, and that's when, you know, I began to feel this, and this phrase came to me, and it stayed with me ever since. If people believe, they buy. But if they doubt, they hesitate. I'll say that again, because this is a phrase that came to me, and I've said, you know, and I really want you to receive it as well. If people believe, they buy, but if they doubt, they hesitate, right? And so at this point in time, you know, I just developed this philosophy, and I then began to apply this to different areas of my life. You know, I then, you know, began to teach this within my team, and eventually I had one of the fastest growing teams in Europe with that particular company. Not only that, just using the same philosophy that if people believe, they buy, but if they doubt, they hesitate. So my responsibility is not to sell them, but it's just to help build their belief, right? And so I used this to land the job of my dreams in about 2006. But not only that, when I worked in management development, doing a lot of consultancy and training work. But actually, whenever there was a difficult client, what was going to be a difficult process, guess who they would invite in to handle that client conversation? Me. And again, when I went into this client conversation, I was not going in there to, in quote, sell our department, sell our solutions. I was going in to help them believe, because, you know, and I have what I call the 4 core beliefs. If you can help them to believe these 4 core things, then they will buy from you. So you don't need to sell to them. This was what helped me to become a top consultant where I worked. But not only that, when I left corporate, you know, to build my business, I still ran with the same philosophy that if I can help people believe, they will buy. So, you know, I was able to build Profit from Coaching from nothing. Within 8 months, we were generating over $10,000 a month. And I say I never sold once on a conversation with anybody, right? I don't handle objections anymore. You know why? Because selling triggers objections. Selling by its very nature triggers objections. So people say, DJ, how do you handle this objection? I'm thinking, if you're getting this objection, then there's a problem with your process, because it means you are trying to sell to people. When you try to sell to people, they will come up with objections. When you're helping people believe, then they will ask questions to get clarity, and there's a difference. They're not saying, I don't think this is going to work. They will be saying, wow, this looks exciting. How, you know, can you help me understand how this fits in? But they must be excited about the possibilities rather than fearful about, you know, the possibilities. So they must be excited about the possibilities. That's building belief, right? Than worried about the possibilities, which is when you're trying to sell. You know, so this really began to excite me. I began to get really great results. But I think more than that, you know, the big thing that really began to happen for me is as I began to master this this 4 beliefs and building these 4 beliefs with people, it means that the whole prospecting process became fun. Having conversations with potential buyers became fun. I hate the word closing, right? Because closing is I'm done. This is I've won, right? But when I'm helping, it's about them. Helping them become a buyer is something I do for them. Closing a sale is something I do for myself, right? And I do believe that for a lot of the people who are like me, you're in the marketplace to make a difference for others, to help others, and to get paid. So if you're going in to help build people's belief so they buy, just like me, you get to a point where you enjoy the process. I could talk to 20 prospects a day, and when I'm done, I'm excited, I'm full of energy. And you know, the beautiful thing of those 20 people who I talk to, most likely minimum 18 of them are going to buy, and it's going to be objection free. It's going to be pain free, you know. So yes, that's why I just don't like selling. I don't like rejection. I hate rejection. I don't like it when people say no to me. And I also don't like having to push back and handle objections. And I don't like making people feel uncomfortable. I don't like getting to a point where I think I'm going to lose this sale, and then I keep trying to clutch and pull them back in and pull them back in, rein them back in. And the reason why you find yourself losing the sale, and this is from experience, is because you were selling in the first place, right? I never find myself in that situation. The only thing that could happen is very early on, we both realize I shouldn't be talking to them and they're not the ideal prospect for me. And that would happen very early on, right? And then I help them realize we shouldn't be talking. But if they're the ideal person, if I actually have the solution to their problems, then all I do is help build their belief and get them to the point where they want what I have more than I want them to have it. And then buying becomes a no-brainer. So that's it. That's why personally I don't like selling. And I know that I may be in a minority when I say this, but actually selling, I do believe, really is costing you a lot of money and also costing you a lot of fun, right? You can have fun, you can make a difference. You don't have to ever handle an objection again, right? If you just understand this, that if people believe, they buy. If they doubt, they hesitate. So rather than trying to sell them, trying to convince them, why don't you just help them believe? And because when they believe, they will want what you have more than you want them to have it. You know, so that's it. That's my story. I hope that's useful for you. I think this is the first time I've really broken it down like this. So I'd love to receive from feedback from you. Go ahead and share it, and I love to hear it. And I look forward to being a part of your success story. This is DJ Spanjo. And once again, thank you very much for your time.